keep people with this fire.
That's cold.
That's cold.
That's saying, baby, you can't do nothing to me. I am kept. Baby, I love Black people, and I'm gonna be spending a whole lot more time with my people. What does it mean when the folks in power, which we're experiencing right now? Nothing.
And dang, you go, Amber. Like, I love this. I love it. How do you feel like you are advancing racial equity?
She says, this is but a drink of water to what I've already endured.
Ooh.
Miss Tashara Parker.
You could just be your whole self.
I knew that I wanted to do something to have impact.
You actually testified before the Texas Senate.
We just want to exist. Representation matters. You can make a difference every single day.
Show up authentically, loud and proud as the person that you truly are. We're still having a conversation.
Oh my God, I'm gonna get emotional.
The internet's favorite cousin.
I can appreciate you showing up as your natural self.
This is a good question, Tashara.
Thanks for bringing it up. Nobody ever brings up.
You're pretty good at this.
We have a lot more coming up. I wanted to see in action.
We're so happy to have you on Loud and Clear. All right, you guys, this next episode is one that I am so excited about. And I say that because Amber is one of my good friends, and you're going to be in for a treat listening to Amber. And what I love about Amber is that she's so forthcoming with the knowledge and the history that she provides. She is a history buff. She is all the things. She's going to talk a little bit about trusting God, what it means to bet on yourself, which a lot of us are doing these days. So welcome again to the Loud and Clear Show with Tashara Parker, where we amplify voices that challenge norms, inspire action, and reimagine what's possible. Today, we are going to be joined by Amber Sims. She is sitting right next to me, okay? She is a trailblazing advocate, historian, and leader who has dedicated her life to advancing racial equity and preserving our untold stories. Yeah, emphasis on our. As the founder of Young Leader Strong City and a contributing writer for Dallas Free Press, Amber's work empowers communities to find their voice and lead systemic change. From leading equity workshops to uncovering the hidden histories of Dallas, she is reshaping the narrative of what it means to build an inclusive, and just society. Amber Sims, welcome to the show. Look, I got my friend Amber here. I hit up Amber. I'm gonna be fully transparent, okay? I hit up Amber. I was like, Amber, I need you on the show. Like, we gonna make it happen. Amber responded to that message. Girl, send me the paperwork, okay? Those aren't her exact words, but she made it happen. So I'm so happy Miss Amber Sims joining the show today. How you doing?
Hey, I am good. I'm so excited to be here with you, friend. And also so proud of you because you do what you say.
I know. It's been a journey. You know it's been a journey. And you've been there every step of the way. So thank you. We got so much to talk about. I first want to start off with Young Leader Strong City, because that organization, I mean, you're just doing incredible work. So I first want to tell people what that organization is and about the work that you're already doing in and around Dallas.
Young Leader Strong City is an organization that I founded with other community members back in 2014 for young people to have space to talk about what was happening to them, especially as it relates to their identity. We're sitting here as two Black girls who have real conversations quite a bit about what that means.
Yeah.
But if we think back to little Tashara and little Amber and our comfort level and our ability to talk about what was happening to us, right? Like around racism, around sexism, and for you to not feel like it was something wrong with you. But what we empower students to do is be like, hey, the system was set up this way, and this is how you navigate it, but also this is how you find your people.
Right.
And that finding your people part is so important, giving them the tools and the skills. So we have an annual summit that's open to all high school students in DFW, helping to grow it. And then we also have a summer camp that'll be this year in June, and just other events that students can connect. And it's open for all students because we know that the work is all of our work, right, around identity and making people feel that they belong. And so people sometimes are like, can white kids come? Sure.
Yeah.
Right? We want everybody to come, right? Can boys come? Can girls come? Yes, absolutely. We want everybody there.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And I love the work that you're doing. So you mentioned like little Amber and little Tashara, right? We didn't have the words to put to these identity conversations that we needed to have, especially growing up. So I guess I want to ask you more about what was kind of the push for you to start this organization? Obviously little Amber, but what else was the push? Like, what were you seeing? This was in 2014 when you were like, no, we gonna make this happen, right? Yeah. What were you guys seeing, you and other community leaders, that needed to have a discussion? Because I know what we're dealing with in 2024, which is crazy. We gonna get into some of that. So I know what we're dealing with now, but in 2014, I was just moving back to Texas from Chicago, got my first job on air in 2014 as a journalist. I don't even remember half of the stuff that was happening in 2014. So what pushed you guys to be like, no, we need to do some work?
Yeah, so there was a national conference. It's called the Facing Race Conference that came to Dallas. It was the first time that it was in the South, which is interesting because we know that most Black people are in the South.
Correct.
And so when we think about the work and where we're doing the work, we can't forget about the South. The South has something to say. And always, and this was supposed to be a one-time thing. All of us had jobs, but what we realized was students were craving a space where they felt like their voices could be heard and used. And so we continued the work, y'all. I was working, this job, that job. And when 2020 happened,
oh boy,
it really opened up something to be like, as Black women, yes, we do try to do it all, but the doing it all is going to
Baby, it's gonna put us in the ground.
It's gonna put you in the ground. Thank you. No euphemisms needed. Okay.
Right.
And so really beginning to think about what it looked like to give the work full time.
Yeah.
And beginning to speak that into existence. I know you were one of the first people, that I talked to around, can I do this? And having that community to be like, yes.
Yeah.
And got some grants, baby, and just said, I'll make up the rest. I know how to make money. And so in 2021, I went full time. And I'm going on 4 years, which is wild.
Baby, you gotta say that. She left corporate America.
Baby, okay.
She got up out of here.
Right, and now have a staff, have a team, have been fundraising. And I think it's, it's been a betting on myself in ways that I hadn't even fully welcomed.
Talk about it.
Right, and it's one thing to be working a job.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be putting something together every day and touching it and saying, I did this, and then for it to still be here.
Yeah.
And we've faced a lot of adversity and challenges in our work. I mean, right after I quit my job, I said, Lord,
come on.
The book banning started, the anti-CRT stuff happened. And it was just like, but, God told me that he's going to keep me. And even in 2024, he has told me that he's going to keep me.
People talk about having faith, baby.
That, but I'm like, okay, the control part of me, the Capricorn, we coming up on our season is like, but how? But I've also had to let go of that, wanting to know exactly how it's going to be not done, but knowing that like I'm here to do it.
I mean, we talk about having faith, and baby, let me tell you something. Until you step out on that faith, you can't talk to me about having no faith, baby, because a lot of people want to talk about it, but when it's time to be about it, you're an example, okay, of leaning on the faith that we know God has for us. I want to talk about the organization a little bit more because we know the work that you've done to get here, but I also want to talk about the impact that the organization has had thus far. Look, I'm going to put you in one of them investor meetings, them grant meetings, okay, when you got to tell the people, what have you done over the last several years? So tell me about the impact that the organization has had thus far.
Since 2014, we've served over 7,500 students.
Yeah. I need a little ding. You know what? Maybe I'm going to incorporate that and be like, ding. Or, how the DJs be like, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
I think I need to incorporate that. Maybe I'll do that in some After Effects or something.
We just had our last summit.
Nice.
And we had, 50 different schools represented, 16 different school districts from across DFW. We're based in Dallas proper, but students come from, Wilmer Hutchins. They come from Plano, Frisco, Denton. And so it's also a testimony to say what space is needed for young people, right?
Yeah.
And I can say, like, I went to Mesquite High School, and we had a bus of students. I've been trying to do this for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
Come, from my high school. And that was really, really special because I had been trying for years, but also it was special to be able to create something that students that were, that walked the halls that I did have done. And then the last thing that I'll say in terms of a huge accomplishment is youth have always been in the forefront of movement work. My family, and we'll talk some more about this as we talk about, how do you know that you can do this, right? And that comes from who we are rooted in and our ancestral way of knowing. So my family is from Birmingham, and, going back and looking at the Children's March that happened, MLK wouldn't have had that without young people.
Come on.
But also realizing, in our own city, like in Dallas, Fort Worth, it has been young people that have pushed us, and said, y'all playing it safe. And so two girls, Beth and Naomi, came to our summit in 2017 after some racist memes went viral in their school district. And one of the things that they said was, we need this summit at our school. And they said, no, our district. Yeah. And they said the district has all of these resources. They wrote the superintendent. And in 2018, we hosted our first YLSC summit for a school district. And that went on to serve over 600 students,
Beautiful.
right? Equity coalitions were created, and those two girls are grown, right? They're working in all of these things, but they created that, and they created our expansion plan. And so I'm trying to, get my successor in play.
Come on.
Because,
Hello?
we're
do
going to
it
talk about
all.
this.
Yeah.
But, I have other things that I want to do, but I knew that it was my part of my life's work to steward this work.
Yeah.
And to make it happen and to make it something that is accessible to students for a long time.
And stewarding this work is exactly what you're doing. You mentioned your family, and obviously one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is what it means to be a protector of our history. And you also mentioned this, Black women, we can't do it all, right? We need some support, okay? And we need some other people lifting us as we're lifting others as well. And so I do want to talk about how do you balance activism, being an advocate as well, along with storytelling, because I'll never forget when me and one of our other friends, Candace, came to watch you present at the African American Museum. And I was so blown away with the wealth of knowledge that I knew you had, but to see you get on stage and to provide that knowledge in front of a group of people, I was just like, dang, you go, Amber. Like, I love this. I love it. And so I want to talk about how you balance all three of those, advocacy, activism, and storytelling, because as a journalist, I know how important all three are, and they need to coexist.
I balance, in interesting ways. I know that the history component and the research and the storytelling is something that I have to do. And so then I started making the space to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But it's hard, right? And I'm starting to feel the tension. But I'm also like naming the tension, like, okay, you a CEO and you trying to do X. What are some things that you're putting down?
Yeah.
And so really leaning on my staff, who is really, really great on bringing in volunteers into our work, and also speaking very clearly. I have people that are around me that are like, okay, so when you gonna write that book, sis?
Oh, yeah.
Right? When are you going to go on that sabbatical, do the
Yes.
things that you want to do?
Yeah.
And I believe very intently, and I say this a lot, is you have different purposes in different seasons.
Absolutely.
And really leaning into the fact that I wasn't meant to do this work forever. And using the platform that I have. And so, but also with our history, I'm making sure to give that back to students, to ensure that students in Dallas know about the local history, right? They know that the civil rights movement didn't just happen in Birmingham, it happened in Dallas. When you
Barely,
cross
though. We need to talk about that.
Well, and right, creating different narratives around that and what, resistance looks like. And that there have been people in the city doing this work, but what does it mean when the folks in power, which we're experiencing right now, so bad, don't want you to have nothing?
And not when the person leading the city gonna flip-flop real quick, but okay, talk about it.
Right,
yeah.
and so, creating those stories so that young people see themselves in the history and also see the skills that it takes, right? It takes resistance, it takes community, it takes, fortitude, and it takes resilience to be able to create change. But then also sometimes you got to go sit down.
Yeah.
And that's also part of my methodology is sometimes I just go sit down.
Yeah, come on. Sometimes you just gotta listen, okay?
Just
I hear people clapping. Okay, look, we got a little bit of audience in the background. Okay, so what are some of the untold stories, Amber, that you've uncovered that have had the biggest impact on you? I mentioned earlier hearing you in person on stage telling stories. I believe this woman was an educator, and you knew her story, but you went and dug deep into this story. That's one that we can dig a little bit into, but just overall stuff that people may not know about the city. So I didn't really understand the whole why. So yes, civil rights happened down our way and in parts of Dallas, but it also skipped over us in a lot of ways, because when certain leaders would try to come here during the civil rights era, some pastors, were a part of not wanting them to disrupt what we had happening in Dallas. And so we can talk about that maybe a little bit, but I also really want you to talk about if there are any other stories that you've uncovered in your work that people need to know about.
Yes, that part around one, history is important and it's also very real, and sometimes it can get glamorized, but we also have to be honest about what happened. And so here in Dallas, Dallas is a big city, and a lot of folks say that, Dallas had something, called an accommodation where, Black leaders in the city and white leaders had agreements around, how many people would be on school board in terms of representation, that there wouldn't be, big protests and, kind of march outs and all of these things. One of the things that I did find interesting is I am researching in a neighborhood in East Dallas called Fraser, Mill City, which was founded by a Black man who wanted to create a Black-owned mill. And did. And so Mill City, this neighborhood is created and he wanted to create jobs and opportunities for Black people. And his name was Mr. Wiley, but there were also like all of these things in the way because he was a Black man in the late 1800s, early 1900s who was trying to do this work. But there was a fairgrounds that Black people had in Dallas that's near where Booker T. Washington is, where his first mill was, is near where Booker T. Washington was. And then it moved over to Mill City. And I just found it like so incredible that this existed, that he used his resources and that the community had it. But also like as early as the early 1900s, there were Black people who were suing to live in a neighboring area that was really close to white people and were moving in. And so in the early 1900s, Black families were suing. And the case ended up going to the Supreme Court. And I want to say that it was like from 1915 to 1940, right? That this legislation was going on, that these lawsuits to have equal housing. And that started here in Dallas. And so the ways in which, the resistance stories people have been fighting, but also, when you're fighting and when you're trying to get something, there's a lesson in when you're winning. Folks try to take it back, right? The power doesn't want you to have even that. And so it helped me to think about like how I think about victory or winning, right? And even on the other side of it is not denying that it happened, but it's also acknowledging the power that is at play to make sure that it didn't happen or that it gets taken back, right? That resistance. And so that's what we're in the afterlife of doing a bunch of dope transformational things across the country. And the afterlife, right, of that is people saying, no, we don't want you to have that.
Right. That's what's happening right now.
Yes.
2024. Yeah. So when you're a young person, right, you are surrounded by a lot of young people in the work that you do. But we can focus on young people, but I also want to focus on people who may be jaded, who are of a certain age, maybe a little bit more seasoned in life, right? How do you keep those people equipped with the tools that they need to continue? I've heard a lot of conversations surrounding rest. Y'all need y'all to rest. They like rest, and then we're going to come back in January, February and figure this out. But how do you keep young people, but also how do you keep just people in general with the fire and desire? What's his name? Rick James, is that fire? And whatever. Anyways.
Is
that the right?
Randy
that one. Yeah. How do you keep people with this fire to keep going?
Yeah, I find extreme encouragement, stories, right? And so that's why I look into the past. My grandmother passed away at the beginning of this year, actually, in Birmingham, and she lived, a long life. She was 95.
Beautiful.
And, something that I think about is like her fortitude, but also like, ooh, how did she make it 95 years in Birmingham, Alabama? And then before that, in the outskirts of, in the country of Alabama. And there's a quote that I heard from an author, and, there's a Black woman who is about to be burnt at the stake. And they ask her, does she have any final words? And she says, this is but a drink of water to what I've already endured.
Ooh. And she about to be burned alive.
But
this is a drink of water.
This is but a drink of water. But what if we come from that?
Right.
Right. And then we think about, not in terms of but that our ancestors have had so much else. And so the things that we are enduring right now are but a drink of water. But also in their stories are the stories of how we are to overcome, right? And how we are to not tire. But also if you think that this is but a drink of water, that's cold.
That's cold.
That's saying, baby, you can't do nothing to me. I am kept. And so then I try to, find those stories about what does that mean and how do I live that? And so it doesn't mean that we don't rest and we don't, reset, but it also means that we come from a stock of people who have given us roadmaps. And so, my work in terms of believing is, you know, the roadmap. And so a couple of things that I brought y'all is like, I live in South Oak Cliff in a house, and I can be kind of indecisive, but I was looking for houses. And when I tell you that I probably looked at maybe 10 houses, and I put an offer in on one house. And I walked in the house and I knew it was mine. And then I went to the back. There was a little house in the back, and there was all of this history stuff. And I was like, oh God, this is my house.
Yeah.
Right. And so a few things that I found, you know, are this Baptist hymnal that dates back to, let me see the year, 1921.
That's crazy.
Okay. And, you know, then, you know, if you know James Cleveland, you know, who is an icon in gospel music, you know, and so this is Sister Ware, and this is from the 1960s as well.
Does that say $1? How much does it say on the
like,
front?
okay, but first of all, $1 singular, right?
Oh my goodness.
And so this is from 1961. And I just think about how if we just take time to slow down, right, and see what's, you know, within us, but also, you know, this idea of preservation.
Yes.
Because my aunts and uncles and, you know, my dad, they're from Birmingham. My aunts are the same age as the 4 girls that were killed in the Birmingham bombing, right? But they are here. And so many of the people, you know, in our families that survived the civil rights movement are here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think part of our inspiration comes from like having those conversations with them. And taking away like okay, we don't talk about that no more.
Yeah.
But also letting them know that like, I couldn't do what you did, but I thank you for what you did. And what am I here to do?
Correct.
Sitting at their feet and learning like the resistance, but also like the steps that we have already created for us, the paths, those people are here and they created those. And so I'm really interested in not losing those stories, right? Because my aunts are, you know, in their mid 70s now. But that is like what gives me hope is like, go talk to people, right? And find out what the experiences are. But those, I think, where the glimmers of hope that will help chart our way forward are right here.
Yeah.
Right. And so what can we do right now is I think just like being in community.
Yeah.
I think these moments will require greater community of us. And so while these times are hard, I'm super optimistic because I was like, baby, I love Black people and I'm going to be spending a whole lot more time with my people.
You hear me?
Right.
And we got to preserve history too,
Yeah.
which is why I absolutely love the work that you're doing all around, because I think when we look at, we all see, when we look at what they're doing with books and taking books out of school and not allowing certain books to be read in schools, it's on us to try to preserve history. And part of preserving that history is making sure that we're telling stories, not just telling stories, that we're documenting stories. So your friends and all of us who are telling you to write this book, yes, write that book, because it's going to be on us to make sure that our stories are documented properly. When you are turning slavery and enslaved people into what they called it, indentured servants,
like be for real.
Are you for real? So the kids are not even learning about how terrible these injustices were, right?
Yeah.
And still are, right? Because we still ain't got no reparations, but y'all talking about reparations for other folks.
Yes.
Girl, good day. Okay. I do have to ask you this, especially since we're talking in line with preserving history. When it comes to education, how do you feel like you are advancing racial equity by way of education?
To me, equity looks like being able to see yourselves in history. And I know we can go back is like not learning about people that looked like me. I didn't read like a real, you know, I was in AP classes in high school, but a book by a Black woman by happenstance because of an extension community program that I was in. And it was Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and how much like that changed my life. But, you know, getting different sources, I say our citational practices matter.
Yes.
And so when I say citational practices, I mean who we cite and who we give credit to.
Come on.
And so, you know, it's like, oh, I heard XYZ from Tashara on Tashara's show. I heard this.
Yeah.
You know, I make sure, you know, that the people that I'm citing, that I'm giving my money to, that I'm presenting as subject matter experts are, you know, women of color, especially like our Black women, that we're giving, you know, our money, you know, to these places, you know, that we're buying the books, that we're listening to the podcast. class, that we're going to the stores, because those things matter. And also, what does it mean, you know, when you are calling Black women's names in spaces? Yeah. Right. You know, and so I'm very intentional, and I know my friends don't play about me either, around speaking our names in spaces and making sure that, like, when I have access, that I am ensuring, right, that people know, like, where I stand, and that they are talking about Black women. And you would be surprised how often, you know, when you are thinking about, like, not even like a research paper, but, you know, if you're doing something at work, like a presentation, how many times, you know, we're not diversifying who the people that we say we get information from are.
Absolutely. And I just have to inject this quickly. That is why the Loud and Clear show exists, baby.
Yes.
And the reason being is because I always wanted to make sure that when we're bringing in subject matter experts, it's funny how we have to be intentional to say, well, did we think about Black woman for this, or Latino or Latin? You know, did we think about those communities when we decided to bring in a person of color, as opposed to just doing Black History Month, or just doing, you know, if we want to talk about breast cancer awareness and we want to focus on Black women? Like, no, this same Black woman expert can be the historian that you bring in to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues that may or may not impact her. However, she can bring a different perspective and the knowledge and scholarship that you need, right, to be able to still talk about that. And so when we talk about SMEs or subject matter experts and bringing them in and making them the expert on, they're already the expert, but excuse me, highlighting their expertise on the shows that we are a part of. I think that is so important. And that's one of the things that I aim to do too.
You know, people think that we don't have, you know, agency, and it feels, and it is true, right? A lot of things are being taken away. And yet there are a lot of ways, like in our everyday choices that we make, that we still have a lot of autonomy and power. And just sitting down and being like, oh, I can invite, you know, we're having some presentation on something at work. Let me find, right, you know, a Black woman to do X, Y, and Z. And so it just requires something different of us, but it requires us to be intentional. And I know that you see it, you know, when I listen to NPR, I'm like, how many people of color do y'all have, you know, for these interviews and, you know, these things? But like, once you begin to, you know, question and even going to your job, you know, a thing that I talk about a lot is vendors. Who is our company giving our money to? And I know it's a matter of convenience sometimes, but also taking ourselves out of the convenience and being like, you know, I'm not going to use DoorDash or Uber Eats today, right? Like, I am going to source Black women-owned companies. And I know somebody, I'm sure one of your listeners got a list, but, you know, I'm going to find those lists. And so when we, you know, have food events, or when, you know, we need someone on a panel, I'm going to intentionally seek that out. That's right. Is so important. And then, you know, in terms of history, the thing that I say, because everybody got a granny, uncle, you know, a great granny who has things in their homes. And the reason why I brought my books is because I wanted to show that these things are valuable.
Absolutely.
You know, and taking the time, you know, as our family members are transitioning to actually go through their things and not be in a rush and see what is there is so important, you all. As someone who does research, the thing that I'll say is Black people are missing from the archives, but we're not missing from history.
Right.
And so things that we can do every day are fill in those gaps. And so before, you know, oh, my grandma was a pack rat, I don't feel like go through this stuff.
My grandma had photo albums for decades.
Go through
and people always like, oh, she always got that camera. I'm like, no, when y'all need pictures of so-and-so from 40 years ago, who you going to?
Yeah, and she's an archivist, right? She's a history teller. And how do we continue like on that work for those of us that are coming behind them? Because when I go to the libraries and, you know, do research, I am looking for Black stories, but some of them are missing. And a lot of them are missing because they in our garage, right? We just haven't taken the time. And so, you know, when my grandmother passed, I wanted to be really intentional, you know, about having my family, us going through photo albums and us seeing what was there. I mean, even like the old funeral programs, those are archives, you know, and then there are collections, you know, like the Dallas Public Library or the library in your town, because I know you have a national, you know, base around people that are listening, but really taking the time to be like, these things are valuable. And if I think that they're valuable and I know that they're valuable, how do I treat that? Right. And that's the same with each of us in our stories. It's like, if I really, you know, believe in Black people and if I'm rooting for everything Black, how do I show that? Right. What does that path look like? And that is really how we are going to keep each other as we, you know, go into 2025.
What does true equity look like to you? And how do you suppose we can get there?
Equity is simply everybody having what they need. And we all need different things.
Yeah.
Right. You know, if you brought me them shoes, I'd be like, ooh, you know, they might not fit my feet.
Yeah.
But like, what do
They barely fit mine,
you
but
know,
yeah.
what do I need? What does Tashara need?
Yeah.
And recognizing because we need different things, does it mean that you're getting something that I'm not? It means that you're getting what you need.
Correct.
And so many of us are based on, you know, I think it is the death of comparison, right? You know, and really looking at the individual and taking time to understand that there are different paths for each of us. But if we all have what we need based on where we are, right? And that's so different from equality, because equality is everyone getting the same thing. Except for we don't all need the same thing because we don't all start in the same places, right? And so, you know, you might have a hearing impairment, or you might be differently, you know, different access needs, right? And so, you know, I think like just taking the time to be considerate, but then also equity, like when you think about what it would mean to have what you need. That's a feeling too. And what does it mean to like hold on to that feeling and to know that, and then to strive, you know, in our relationships, how can I help you get what you need?
Yeah. I want to ask you this, especially as we are entering a new era. Okay. We'll leave it at that. And DEI policies being phased out of many companies. We don't have to go down a list of the companies. Y'all can do your own research on Google. They out there. Okay. So watch where you're shopping at. But when you see these policies, and, you know, sometimes I even hate to say DEI because I feel like now it's a trigger phrase, right? And if we can keep it above, can we keep it all the way above?
Please.
Okay. All right. So organizations are having to reshape how they do DEI, especially when it comes to if they want to get this funding from them people with the money.
Say it.
Oh, okay. So I am asking you, how do you see storytelling evolving as you're watching in real time companies separate themselves from just saying that we want to have equality and equity in our hiring practices, right? I watch Texas A&M University have to do away with their DEI departments. It was funny, I couldn't believe it happened. I went to a gala not too long ago at the university, one that I had been honored at the year prior, but I went this time in support, and I saw one of my old professors there. And I talked to him, and he was telling me, oh, I had to move over to one department because this particular department was phased out. And I was like, wait, for real? He's like, yeah, like my title had to go under something else just so that I can still have my job, have a job. And so when it comes to storytelling and making sure that we're still in fight to tell our stories, in a day and age where so many institutions, and by the way, Texas A&M wasn't the only one, and this was a statewide initiative.
UT,
talk about it. So I say them because that's my alma mater, love them to death, but it is what it is. That's what went down. And so how do we continue to make sure that we're telling our stories? Because bottom line, you need funding to continue doing what you're doing. And we have to be able to get that funding by way of still fighting for what we believe in, but also how do you change that narrative to make sure that the message is still being out there?
Yeah, all really amazing points. When we look at college admissions right now, Black, you know, middle class, non-first generational students are actually stand to lose the most. And so, you know, neither of us have kids, but as people that are college educated, what that means is that there are less opportunities for, you know, our kids to get into some of these more selective universities in college. But that narrative is also talking about a particular type. Because, you know, we're not talking about the HBCUs and, you know, things like that. And so what does it mean to invest? And I did not go to an HBCU. You know, my parents did. But I also think about, you know, like those narratives and that legacy.
But we support them wholeheartedly, baby.
Wholeheartedly.
And if you can make it happen, make it happen.
Jarvis Christian College, you know, my family went to Alabama State, Alabama A&M, Tuskegee, you know, Stillman. And I see the value more and more. And so what this moment is going to require of us is, you know, donating and giving our time and our resources and, you know, our greatest assets, which are our children. right, into these organizations and and ensuring that they are healthy. It's going to look like the institutions that we have. We know we've named the African American Museum. Dr. Robinson here in Dallas has just retired. After 50 years of building an institution.
Wow. Yeah.
50 years, and I think the thing is like, how can we ensure that this place remains, right? And it's with our time, it's with our dollars,
expertise.
It's in expertise, volunteering. And then the other thing, that I am thinking about is back to history, hearkening upon the fact that like we have seen times such as this is but, a drink of water, and what does that really mean? But it's also going to be, they in the civil rights movements and before would have something called house meetings.
Yeah.
Right. And salon dinners, where we would, be in each other's homes and share meals and break bread and read books and have this community. And so like with space and being together, it's that togetherness that also fostered movement, right, and resistance. And so like during this time we get to build, but we get to build in community, and that just creates a sense of hopefulness, right, because you're one of those people that I get to build with, right? The people that are listening to this podcast are part of the network of people that we get to build with. And we have to know that it is possible, and dream what that looks like and feels like, right, and prepare, for the haters. But also prepare that right, and prepare for the fact that this is happening because there was so much done, so much significant work.
Amber, where can people find you?
Yes, y'all. So speaking of donating and finding folks, you can find Young Leaders Strong City. You can just Google Young Leaders Strong City or YLSC Movement. .com. And then for my work, you can find me at Dallas Free Press. I have written a series of articles about the history of Black schools in Dallas, and they are all there, and it'll take you to the feature in the Dallas Morning News. And just, so excited to be here and continue to tell stories because our stories matter, right? And giving value to us. And so thank you for seeing us, Tashara, and creating space, right? Because that's also what these movements require is for us to imagine what is possible and what doesn't exist here yet.
That part. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you, friend.
Thank you, friend.